we said this session is mainly to help everybody learn a little bit more about how to go about choosing the right technology, the right solution, the right pot for their application. And so bear with me a little bit if I'm getting too technical about things. I'll try to keep it very simple so it's very easy to understand. But it's going to be a great session for everybody to learn from and then make a very educated decision if anybody over here is interested in a robotic solution. So with that being said, I think a little bit about us, and we already gave a little bit of a background, but we've been doing this for a little over 10 years now in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. And we have always tackled this from an engineering standpoint, kind of understanding the technology and ensuring that when we are offering these solutions to our customers, we offer the right solution and not just offer them something that is available, right? And that's why we chose to partner with some of the leading brands, that some of the logos that you see over here. And we have taken the time to understand how some of these robots work, in what scenarios they work, and learn from that and correlate that with the technology and came up with the right way of executing things. And that's where we take pride in being one of the differentiating, I would say, dealers or providers of robotic technology. We also are very proud to have multiple patents within this field. We have a gate solution, as some of you might have seen on our website. We'll talk a little bit about what's new in that for this year as well. And we have make sure that all our technicians are fully trained, and we are putting a lot of emphasis on providing the right support to our customers. So that's a little bit about us. I don't want to spend any more time on this, and we can dive deeper into the session for today. So from 2026, the highlights of this year is, first of all, the technology, right? So the technology has come a long way on the robotic mowing side, at least. And as most of you might know, that we were using a very outdated technology until very recently, which was the wired technology, where the wires had to be buried along the perimeter. But that has evolved over the last, I would say, 6 to 7 years. And we'll talk a little bit about all the different technologies and all of that. Then the drive system that the robots use also has evolved quite a bit over the last few years. Earlier, it would just be simple brushless DC motors, but then now we have in-hub motors, we have all-wheel drives, we have rear-wheel drive, we have front-wheel drive. There are all these kind of different variations. But what do they really mean? Does it really make sense? The other thing we're seeing in 2026 is the abundance of manufacturers who are filling up the space really fast. So if you Google robotic mowers today, you will see like 50 different brands pop up, and then a typical user is very confused on which one is the right one. Do I go just by price? Do I need to look at technology? And everybody are using all these fancy terms in terms of technology. What do they really mean? So again, everybody's trying to rise above the noise, trying to use these terms, trying to differentiate themselves. So it's creating a lot of confusion. The other thing that we are also seeing is an increase in commercial adoption. So more and more people, including landscapers and organizations and large facilities, are adopting robotic mowing, primarily driven by shortage in labor and cost challenges, and the fact that the cost per unit acre is going down with robotic mowing. It's just making sense to adopt on the commercial side, and that's something we've seen take off quite a bit over the last 6 to 8 months or so. And finally, service upkeep is another thing. So which mower will give me minimal service with maximum runtime? That is something that needs to be also taken into account. So summarizing all of this, essentially the key components that are important that we'll cover today are how the robots localize themselves, what technologies are used, and which one is best in what scenario, what kind of drive systems are available today, what kind of cutting systems are available today. And on top of all of this, there are other things like their sensors, their features, the app, and all the other things that come on top of all of this, which essentially build the entire robotic lawnmower or any other robotic system for that matter. And so we'll talk about all of this so that everybody gets a good understanding of where we are going with this. All right, so this is just a quick snapshot of the top 5 brands, and then we are going to stay within these top 5 brands, and then you'll see that in a second as to why, because these are the 5 brands that we work with the most. And what we've seen is all of them have come up with something new in 2026. Some have more versus the others. So, for example, if you see Husqvarna, they had like 8 different key models that they were offering before 2026. This year they added 3 of them, probably the least out of all of them. Kress added a bunch of new models to their lineup. Same with Segway, they've added a bunch of new models to the lineup. Sunseeker has added some, and some really good ones. And Yarbo is trying to get a little bit more into the smaller residential space with their Mini, and we'll talk about that a little bit. So everybody has added something, and a lot of this is a mix of drive systems and technology and fusion of technologies, and we'll talk about some of that as well. Now, if I see, if I take all the other brands outside of these 5, which we consider our top 5, there are like over 150 different models of robotic lawnmowers to choose from. And when a typical end user goes and does like a Google search, they see like, I mean, it's pretty overwhelming in terms of the number of models and the brands that are available. And these are some of the other notable brands that we've seen in the space. I'm sure a lot of you guys are familiar with them as well. Some are Kickstarter brands, some are more commercial, some are traditional OP dealers trying to get into the space. So there are all kind of players out there. Some are like robotic vacuum providers like Robotic and mower and Dreamy. They're traditionally robotic vacuum providers, but now they're getting into the space of robotic lawnmower. But the question is, are they really set up for that? So we will talk about some of that as well. Now, when we talk about brand, as to which brand and why we're working with this 5 brands. So whenever we sign up with someone with any brand, and we've actually worked with more brands than this, and we chose to discontinue. I don't want to take any names here, but and then the reason is because we evaluate a brand on all these different aspects as to how reliable their product is in terms of performance, how well do they perform, what is the value for money if I do purchase this product, even if it's expensive or cheap, am I getting the value for the money? What is the build quality like? Is it built with cheap plastics or built with good plastics, especially the internals as well? What kind of motors they're using, what kind of electronics, what kind of architecture is being used, how easy it is to repair, and things like that. What are the technology and other features that they offer in terms of the lineup? What kind of support they have? This is a very important thing which a lot of people tend to overlook, because we've had a lot of issues with some of brands outside of these who we have struggled to get support even as a dealer. Forget getting support to the end customer. Even as a dealer, we had to struggle getting any kind of support. So it's very important that you get a good support from a specific a specific manufacturer, and you are able to support the end customer with a good dealer network. A dealer network on the robotic mower side becomes a little bit more important, because these are mechanically intense device, because they're more mechanical in nature than, let's say, a robotic vacuum. Robotic vacuum is more like flat in a temperature control environment mostly, so it's prone to lesser mechanical exposure, versus a robotic lawnmower is, first of all, it's so relatively larger in size, and it requires more maintenance, relatively speaking. So having a good dealer network becomes very important, because if an issue arises, you need someone to help you with it as soon as possible, and that becomes a big aspect when we look at these brands. Reputation and experience, of course. What is their reputation? Even though they are new brands, how well are they funded to support their product? That kind of comes into play. Um, what kind of experience do they have? It's like some of these brands that you see here have pretty long, I would say, tenure in the OPE industry. So they have experience working in the OPE industry, and now they're introducing robots, and they do have some experience behind that as well. So that also matters a lot. And biggest thing for us as dealers, and even for DIY users who are probably, they prefer managing and maintaining and taking care of repairing the robots on their own, what is the serviceability of these? We have worked on some robots from brands other than these, and my technician had to spend like almost 4 hours just opening up the robot and changing a motor. Versus if I do the same comparative thing with Husqvarna, it takes like 20 minutes to do the same thing. So those are the kind of things that become, because if it's more complex, more chances of having higher labor rates, and then the support is not as good because they don't want to pay the dealers that much of labor. Dealers don't want to support it. All of those aspects come into play, and that's why these are the different pillars against which we measure a brand that we sign up with, and that's why we choose to work with these 5 brands, and we keep evaluating new brands as they come in, but yeah, these are the top 5. Now, with that being said, let's quickly look at the evolution of technology as it relates to robotic lawnmowers. So back in 1995 is when Husqvarna introduced the first robotic lawnmower ever. That was a solar robot, and everybody was very skeptical, but they stuck by it. They kept working on it till they first introduced a self-charging robot sometime in the late 90s. And that evolved to the Gen 2 of a wired. Now, all of this is mostly Husqvarna till we reach like 2020 plus, because they essentially were the leaders in this. They are the ones who essentially started this whole industry in a way. And they introduced the Gen 2 wired units, which were much better, more modern in their construction, and had more modern features and things along those lines. And that kind of was slowly picking up in Europe. And then I would say soon after 2010, after the economic disaster that we have, and people were looking to save money, there was a little bit of an uptick in robotic mowing in European market. And that kind of encouraged Husqvarna to come up with their the new GPS for cellular model, which is what a lot of our customers even now have it. The 450X, the 430X, the 315X, all those robots, and that's when it was also introduced in the US for the first time, and that's when we actually became the dealers around 2015, 2016 timeframe with Husqvarna. And that was pretty much the benchmark for any robotic lawnmower. Husqvarna was, right? And then they also introduced the first commercial RTK unit. The first wireless unit was introduced sometime in 2019, and we were fortunate enough to be one of the first to be testing it, and we were so excited. And it worked great. It had its nuances of under trees and things along those lines, and then they introduced the residential RTK, and that's when soon after post-COVID is when the noise started increasing because the wireless technology was proven to be working, and then we started seeing more and more players. If you see a lot of those X marks around 22, 23, 24, all those. I mean, Kress was actually also there. On the wired side, but all the wireless units kind of took off sometime post-COVID. And that's when we started seeing the influx, and the technology started getting better and better. And then the fusion of technology started, because there were all challenges with one technology, and then we had vision with RTK, and then that had its own challenges. And now we have vision with RTK and LiDAR. We'll talk about that a little bit as well. And now, even the next step to that is network RTK. Again, we'll talk about all these technologies in a second. And what we think future is going to be is semantic vision, where because now as AI is getting cheaper in terms of the processing power that you can put on a, let's say, hardware device, semantic vision will enable these devices to look at relative. Like, for example, when you're looking at an object, you can see what that object means as it relates to, let's say, the fence. If you have a rake resting against the fence, it can make a inference of what that means and what the device has to do up around it. It's not just looking at it as an obstacle and going around it, right? So that is probably the next thing that might come in vision. Radar is something that we see, like millimeter wave radar is pretty common in cars, but it might be a little too expensive for a small robot like this. But as it gets cheaper, that will give you even more precise positioning and obstacle avoidance. And then I think the biggest one, which I think we are already seeing coming, is the trimmer capability, which is trimming. This is a question that I think 8 out of 10 customers ask us: what is available today that can even trim? And we'll touch on that a little bit as well. So these are this is the evolution that we have seen, and other than, I would say, the phase 1 and 2, we've been part of it since phase 3. Well, yeah, phase 2 actually. So it's been a pretty exciting journey, and then we are really excited about where this is taking us. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the localization technologies. So, like we mentioned in the previous slides, the 5 or 4 pillars for a robotic lawnmower. One of them is, of course, localization, which is very important. The robot needs to know where it is. It needs to find its way through the garden, through the lawn, and find all the zones and all of that. So localization is definitely the number one priority for a robot. And legacy technology was wire technology, which is no longer available. It's all retired now, although Husqvarna still offers that as part of their robots. But nobody wants to wire anymore. Then there is dedicated RTK. Dedicated RTK is nothing but you have to install an antenna that still uses the satellites to kind of correct itself and to an accuracy of 1 to 3 centimeters. So you have a dedicated network within your house. You're not relying on anything external. It stays local. So that's dedicated RTK. Then there's vision. There's stereo vision. There's vision with a single camera, and these just help. There are robots that use just vision, but of course, just vision has its own downside in terms of operating in low light and dark, or in the night and things along those lines, and it may not be as accurate. But so typically, vision is used as a supporting technology with RTK. So it does give a little bit of more juice to the robot in terms of localizing itself in case the robot loses itself, while it's trying to localize using RTK. Then there's network RTK. Network RTK is essentially same as dedicated RTK, but the only thing different is you no longer have a dedicated antenna for a specific location. Instead, you're using an existing network of antennas, which is maintained by AT&T, Verizon, or some other RTK network providers. And instead of communicating directly with the antenna, which happens in the case of the dedicated, it communicates with the local antenna within that geography using cellular connectivity or internet. So that's network RTK. And then finally, there's LiDAR or radar, which essentially have been around for a while. It's being used in robotic vacuums pretty successfully. But outdoor LiDAR is a little bit more challenging. It was a little bit more expensive, but it's gotten cheaper over time. And now it's gotten better as a technology for outdoor use, thanks to connected cars and the driverless cars, and it's something that is now finding its way in robotic mowers, and I think we are loving what we're seeing on that side as well. So we'll talk a little bit about all of these in each one of these technologies in brief, so that there's an understanding of how they work at a very high level. So when someone is trying to pick a robot for their property, they understand, okay, these are the nuances that can come with X, Y, or Z. So that's the idea of going through some of these technologies. So let's start with RTK technology, right? So like I mentioned earlier, RTK has two variations to it, the dedicated RTK, or it has a network RTK. So starting with dedicated RTK. So the way RTK, it stands for real-time kinematics. So what that is essentially it's in real time, it's measuring the GPS signals. So and it's getting a correction for that signal to correct itself in real time. That's why it's RTK. And the way it works is essentially you have an antenna at a fixed position, which is looking at the satellites. And then you also have the robot, which is actually always moving, which is looking at the same satellites, right? And because the robot is always moving, the accuracy of the location that it gets from the satellite is not accurate. It's because there's so many variations, the atmospheric changes, all of those, the multipath propagation, the 100 issues that can cause even if you see on your phone, sometimes you're slightly off. And off by a few meters is plenty for a robotic mower to go mow your lawn or be in your swimming pool, right? And that's why what this fixed antenna does is, because it sits in a fixed position for so long, over time, it's able to determine its accurate position, the antenna's accurate position, over to an accuracy of 1 to 2 centimeters, because it's constantly getting the signals from the same satellites, and it's able to then measure what the error is, and then it's able to figure out what its fixed position is. And now the robot is constantly moving. So the robot then reports, okay, I'm seeing ABC satellites. So the antenna then sends a correction signal to the robot saying, okay, you need to correct your signal by XYZ. And that's why that communication happens, where the robot is constantly communicating with the antenna, and it tries to get those correction signals so it can continue to locate itself accurately. And that's why it's so important, the placement of antenna. And this is something, whenever we talk to customers, we say, hey, we want to install the antenna on your roof. They say, why can't you just put it next to my house? Because, and this picture on the right kind of explains that, right? So if I keep the antenna on the ground, the antenna might see some satellites, and the robot might be seeing some other satellites when it's on the other side of the house, and it's not able to give the correction signals for the satellites that the robot is seeing, and that ends up in an issue of not being able to localize itself correctly. So that's the reason the placement of antenna in this kind of scenario becomes very important. Again, the pros of this is there's no dependency on internet. You are responsible to manage your own antenna, and you're still getting the same accuracy as commercial RTK systems. And any downtime is managed by the owner. But the cons is, of course, it requires an antenna installation. It can be expensive. If you don't want to install it yourself, you want someone like us to come and install it. Climbing on a roof can be expensive. So that can be cost prohibitive for some folks. And location and positioning of the antenna becomes very important for optimal performance. Any disturbances to the antenna will also impact the installation, because now the moment you move the antenna, its fixed position has moved. So any correction it sends will be against that fixed position, but it's all, the installation was done based on its previous position. So the entire installation moves by that much. So that's why these are some of the cons of having this, right? And the communication that happens between the robot and the antenna is typically some sort of a radio communication. A lot of the Chinese manufacturers use LoRa, long-range radio. It's a very common protocol in the IoT industry. And Husqvarna, for example, uses their own proprietary, they use, I think, some chipset from XP or something like that to do that same communication. Usually it's in that range of 920, 930 megahertz range, so which has a pretty decent range. So that's basically what a dedicated RTK is. When we talk about network RTK, think of the same setup, but instead of having the antenna dedicated to your house on your rooftop, there's some provider who's maintaining a network. Like a lot of times AT&T has it on one of the cell phone towers, and then they lease this network to their customers. like for agriculture and other applications. And I think some of the mowers that we're seeing who are using network RTK are using the same network now. And there are multiple providers of RTK network. Typically, one provider does not have coverage all over. So chances are that a lot of these manufacturers who are offering network RTK are using multiple providers. So it's very important that one checks the coverage map before they choose the robot. And most of them have the map available on their website for you to see whether or not your area is covered by a network provider or not. And in this case, again, it uses it's also called as NTRIP. It's another protocol that's used instead of communicating through that radio frequency between the robot and the antenna. It's now using an internet connection and a protocol to communicate to the antenna, which might be a couple of miles, a few miles away from the location. But the antenna is installed high enough where it's seeing the same satellites as the mower in that backyard or in that lawn. So it's able to still send the correction signals, but only thing it happens over the internet connection. And so it's also important that other than having coverage of the RTK network in that area, it's also important that the cellular coverage is also good, because if you don't have good cellular coverage, the mower will not be able to send and receive those correction signals, right? So that also becomes important. So again, pros: no antenna installation, out of the box, ready to install. You don't have to worry about all of that when managing that. Same accuracy as fixed RTK. But then cons: you also require a good cellular signal for the mower to communicate, and any downtime by the provider, then you basically are dead fish in water, because you don't have any other ways to maybe use it. Now, some of them offer both, where you can use a local and then you can fall back to network RTK. So that might be another option to mitigate that. But this is the most, I would say, this is getting more popular, the network RTK, because it's just so simple and easy for and this is another reason why the the commercial adaptation has increased, because they don't have to worry about these antennas anymore. So that was RTK technology, right? Sorry. It's a little bit about LiDAR. So even in LiDAR, there are two types. There are robots that come with this dome LiDAR, and then there are robots that have this inline solid state LiDAR. Both have their pros and cons. So in a dome LiDAR, you typically have a mechanical, it's a mechanical device inside that's spinning, just like a robotic vacuum. You must have seen some of those spinning devices on top of the robot vacuum. And it's essentially a beam or array of light that's spinning. It's usually laser beams or infrared light, depending on how it's implemented. And as these pulses are transmitted, it bounces off objects and is received. And based on the receive time, it calculates how far an object is, how close it is from an object, and it calculates that around the robot. That's because it's spinning all the time, right? And it creates like a point cloud map of what it's seeing around it, and kind of creates a map with it. And that's how it works. Now on the inline or solid state, there are no moving parts. It's a solid state, I would say, laser that's transmitting an array of light and receiving that. And typically it's between 120 to 160 degrees only in the front. And it's doing the same thing as the 360, but only thing it's an array of light versus maybe a single, it's a multiple array of light versus a single array, for example. So that kind of helps you capture whatever is in front of the robot as it sees it. And now there are pros and cons of both. Now, anything that has a moving part over time might tend to fail, because it's a mechanical part. Vibration and all of those things can kind of impact, and the wear is possible over time. But that's not the case in inline, because it's solid state, so it will not have any mechanical failures. It tends to have a longer life. So dust and pollen exposure, the The dome is a little bit more susceptible to that. However, brands like Sunseeker have implemented a little brush on the charging station. So every time the mower goes in and out of the charging station, it cleans the dome. Because the moment you have all the dust and pollen that might accumulate, especially in the early spring or late fall, that can refract and deflect the light differently, and the detection might become a little bit funky, and it might struggle. So that becomes a little bit of a challenge. But on the solid state, that's not an issue because it's usually in front and it's a little bit recessed. So you normally don't see any accumulation because it's against gravity. So it won't be with gravity. The height profile can be a challenge on the dome because if you, for example, you're supposed to put a little cap on it and then flip it and then do the cleanup. If you forget to do that and you flip the robot to, let's say, change the blades, you end up having a bunch of scratches on the dome, and then it can start affecting. So it's more prone to scratches, or if it gets stuck under a branch or a bush or something like that, it's prone to scratches, and any kind of impact on that dome in terms of scratches or dents or anything like that can impact how the light is detected by the sensors inside, right? And but again, the pros of the dome is that it has a higher resolution because it's continuous data all around the robot, versus in the inline it's just in the front. But then the question would be, is it really required for application like robotic mower? Maybe in some cases it is, in some cases it might not be as important. The power consumption on the dome is going to be a little bit higher because there's an additional mechanical motor that's spinning. So compared to solid state, it's going to be a little bit higher. That might impact its battery life, also a little bit higher cost, and things like that. So those are the main differences between the two. But typically the inline might be sufficient for most yards, but there might be situations where the dome might be better because you have too many obstacles, you have too much of clutter in the lawn. Then the dome really can help mitigate some of that. So that's a little bit of a difference between the LiDAR dome technology versus inline LiDAR, right? And these are the two variations that we are seeing for the most part in robotic mowers right now. Talking about vision, again, there are two variations to vision. One is the stereo vision, where you have essentially two cameras, almost like human eye, where both cameras are looking at the same object from different angles. And then it essentially uses geometry to estimate what the depth is. It tries to perceive the depth of the object. Now, the same thing is being implemented with a single camera, but with a single camera, the perception of depth is not geometrically possible. It looks at things like change in shadows and things like that, and AI becomes a big aspect in trying to understand what that might be and estimating that. And that's where you're seeing a lot of this AI term being used with robots, robotic lawnmowers especially. And depending on how good the AI is, it'll be able to give you the same thing as, let's say, a stereo, but it will never be the same. Because from a geometry standpoint, the stereo camera is more accurate, but the single camera can be accurate to a certain extent, but it'll struggle a little bit more in certain scenarios compared to a stereo. And with any vision, as long as you have a lot of reference points, you will be able to get a good estimation of where the robot is, what it's seeing. But if you have like plain, like for example, if it's looking at a plain wall, same color throughout with no texture, then it might struggle in terms of where trying to use just vision to figure out where it is. Low light can also impact it because it's not able to get a lot of reference points, and things might be a little bit hard for it to perceive. Object recognition probably is similar on both. It doesn't really matter as long as it looks at the object, and then it uses AI to kind of look at the shape, form of the object and figure out what it is. And all of these things come under the features part of the robot, where what are they using the AI for? Is it just for vision? Is it also for object recognition, or it's for maybe learning your yard in terms of size and things? So there are different aspects of it. but usually they blanket it under one word called AI vision or something like that, right? So those are the things that become important. But typically, some of the high-end robots, we look at the larger robots, they always use stereo vision because that's always more accurate. But then if you see the cheaper robots, they use a single camera, but then they have better complementing technologies like LiDAR or RTK to support it. So that's where the vision comes into play. So if I had to compare all these three technologies that I just explained about, the RTK, whether it's network or whether it's dedicated, doesn't matter. Then there's vision-based localization, and then there's LiDAR-based. You see, not all of them are able to solve every kind of scenario. Like, for example, if I look at vision, it always needs light. It cannot work very well in dark. Whereas LiDAR and RTK can work pretty well even in dark, doesn't really matter. But then if you look at visibility the performance under trees and in narrow passages, and where you don't have satellite signal or you have multipath propagation, you have a lot of noise from satellites. In those kind of scenarios, RTK will not work very well, but vision may work for the most part, depending on how well it's lit up and other things. But LiDAR is going to work great in those scenarios. So overall, I mean, not one technology does not solve all the problems. And that's why what we are seeing is, which is the next slide, is more and more manufacturers, pretty much all of them, are doing technology stacking. So essentially, they're stacking one base technology for their localization, and then on top of that, they're adding other supporting technologies. Now, there's always a trade-off. The more you add, the more expensive it gets, and then more complex it gets. So there's a balance in that as to, like, for example, Husqvarna uses, of course, RTK as the base technology for localization, but then it uses radar, and it also has wire technology, like, which can be used as a backup in case there's no signal under a tree. You can technically run a wire on the wireless units to run that area. And then, of course, all of them use IMU sensors and odometry and other standard technologies to measure how far the robot has gone, where it's turned, which direction, because all of those are required for any other technology to work well. So odometry and IMU sensors are always there as the final thing, and they're always used in tandem with all of these technologies. But the technology fusion becomes kind of, okay, what fusion of technologies is right for my yard? Do I really need LiDAR, or do I need just RTK sufficient? Do I need maybe RTK with vision? It also depends a lot on what is your main use case? What are you trying to solve? What is your biggest pain point, right? So things along those lines. But everybody has some sort of a technology stack, and I'm not going to go through all of this, but this is just to give an idea of what is being done by manufacturers. Now, if I try to, looking at what we just discussed, and if you try to understand what the trend is, I mean, before 2025, legacy technology was like wired technology as well as some dedicated RTK, and then we started seeing a lot more value with RTK technology because it was enabling wireless robots for lawn mowing purposes. And then we also started seeing some fusion. So the primary focus before 2025 was, how do I go wireless? How do I make it work well? And how do I make it easy? That was the primary focus. If I look at 2026, I think we have already solved that problem with the robots that we have today. I'm very confident that I would say 99% of the yards can be installed with a very reliable robot. So the reliability aspect of localization has been addressed, and now the focus is on, okay, how do I make it even more reliable? How do I make it cheaper? How do I make it better? How do I fuse these technologies for even better performance? So that's where the focus has gone this year. And another focus that we see this year is for large acreage units. So we're seeing 3-acre, 6-acre, 9-acre, 22-acre units coming in for commercial. And that's mainly because of the higher adoption on the commercial side, especially with landscapers and with other organizations who are adopting this more and more. So that's what we are seeing in 2026. So if I talk about the future, I think the biggest thing will be, okay, now I have a great robot with great localization. I have pretty good variation of robots available for different sizes. Um, good fusion of technology. Okay, now how do I make it better, right? So, and that's where we spoke about some of the other technologies that might come to make it cheaper, better. That will always be there. But then I think what value add are we offering? Once these robots are in your house, what other things can the manufacturers offer you? I mean, we've been in discussion with some of these manufacturers about concepts like it'll start studying your garden and it'll give you areas where your grass is not doing so well. So then you can tweak your sprinkler system to water that zone more. Eventually, it will maybe integrate into a sprinkler system. There's also concepts like it'll look at all the other trees and bushes and shrubs and plants in your garden, and it will learn about if some plant is dying or it's not doing good. It'll tell you why. It might be because it's facing north or facing south and it's getting too much sun. You might want to do X, Y, Z. So those are the kind of data mining for value, I would call it. Mine your data and extract value to give it back to you. And then also kind of creating a marketplace where, if as long as users are okay with it, you share, like they use this data for things like pollination or cross-pollination within, that community. And there are a lot of concepts being discussed. I think that's where we are seeing it go a lot. And then, of course, trimmer is a big one, which I think we would definitely see some of that coming in future because I don't think anybody has solved this problem the way it should be solved. And I think other things like fertilizing, I think Yarbo is doing some stuff to add modules for fertilizing or weed control and all of the other things. So these are the different things that we are seeing from a trend standpoint, and we are very excited about where it's heading, and we'll see how it evolves over next few years. So I believe someone has a question. I think we'll keep all the questions for later, so that way we can finish all this and then we can answer the questions. I maybe need 15-20 minutes more, and we'll probably be wrapping this up. Okay, so other consideration is the drive system, right? So again, when we started with the robotic mowers, it was mostly the first one over here that you see the rear drive. So, sorry, number 2 that you see, the rear drive system. And over time, we've seen all-wheel drive, we've seen front-wheel drive, and we've seen 3-wheel drive where the center wheel in the back is an all-wheel drive. So essentially, at a high level, there are 3 different, I would say, classifications. You have the front-wheel drive, you have the rear-wheel drive, and then you have the all-wheel drive. What are the pros and cons, right? Now, if I talk about the front-wheel drive has much better control over the robot, and the rear wheels are usually casters in this case, except for like models like Sunseeker. We'll talk about that in a second. But the robot has better control and is able to get into those tight spaces and make those tight turns pretty well with the front-wheel drive. But then the cons are, it has it's usually more suitable for smaller yards because it's not able to overcome obstacles, because the rear wheels are just casters. It doesn't have, it's essentially pulling its weight instead of pushing, right? So that's where there are limited applications, and usually you see these front-wheel drive robots in much smaller sizes, like the 110, 105, the 115 that Husqvarna had. These are all the small size units which had the front wheel drive. Rear wheel drive is a classic. That's a lot of robots have that design, and that has been very successful design. Again, it has its own limitations as well. It has limited slope capability in terms of how much slope it can handle. But it's very efficient from a design standpoint, and it has worked very well. But if it runs into a ditch or something like that, the chances are it'll have a hard time getting out of it. And those are the challenges with a rear wheel drive. But those are pretty common, and for a lot of our customers, we recommend the rear wheel drive unless and until they really need an all-wheel drive. Now let's talk about all-wheel drive. So as you guys must have seen, that all-wheel drive is kind of the buzz right now. Everybody wants an all-wheel drive, and there are so many different designs that are available in all-wheel drive, right? So if I talk about the front pivot design, actually the fifth one, which is a rare pivot design, which Sunseeker has, we'll talk about that too. So the front pivot design is where you have the four wheels, all are of course motorized, and then the front system or the front portion of the robot is able to pivot or turn. Husqvarna has implemented it in such a way where the entire front body, the two different bodies, and then the front body entirely pivots. That was a genius design for mostly for random mowing because that was wired, but they continued with that same design even on the wired units. So now it becomes a little bit inefficient when you have to do, for example, sequential mowing. But either way, that was a great design. And then on top of that, now everybody is coming up with this front pivot where the wheels essentially turn and you get a full zero turn capability. And of course, it's able to handle bumps better. It's able to handle slopes better. It's able to, I mean, get out of areas where, you know, the rear wheel drive was getting stuck, for example. So it definitely has great advantages. But if you talk about all-wheel drive in general, the battery efficiency is going to be lower because you're powering four wheels. So the amount of battery that's needed to mow, let's say 1 acre, it's going to be much higher than a rear wheel drive. Now, what does that mean? One might say, I don't really care. I mean, as long as it mows my lawn, right? But if you don't really need an all-wheel drive, you essentially using up the battery faster because the life of a battery is defined by number of charge cycles. And if it's going to deplete that battery much faster because now you're trying to mow that large area with something that has a lower, I would say, a lower battery efficiency, then battery is probably 30% of the cost of most of these robots. So you'll have to change the battery out faster. And then that's comes in the long-term maintenance. But that's and as the robot is using more and more of the battery, the life of the battery starts degrading faster. So you might see that the amount of time it's spending on the lawn mowing will be reducing much faster than, let's say, a rear wheel drive because the battery efficiency is going down. But with that being said, all-wheel drive has other advantages now because you have control over all four wheels and you want those perfect straight lines when you're cutting these stripes. The robot has control everywhere. So even if it runs into a ditch, it's still going straight versus a rear wheel drive. If it runs into a ditch, it'll kind of wobble a little bit in the front and you might see a crooked line over there. Crooked line might be very ugly for someone who is very, has no OCD about how this line should look. So those are the kind of other advantages that all-wheel drive, other than the terrain and all of that, brings. Now, but within this all-wheel drive, if I talk about the designs, the worst design as per us is this roller design, the number 5, where you have these roller things in the front and the wheel is fixed, but then it essentially slides the robot to turn. And what you're doing is you're essentially creating a friction between the wheels and the grass. And if you go and do some Google search, you'll see a lot of customers seeing like using that design. They complain about a lot of skid marks and trampled grass and torn grass and things like that, only because when it has to make a lot of turns, let's say you have a complex yard with a lot of nooks and crannies, then this robot is going to make a lot more turns. And especially if the dirt is a little wet and it's rained a little bit, then you'll start seeing that more and more. So that design is our worst. It's worst in our opinion as far as the all-wheel drive is concerned. Although, and we've also seen that when it has to handle slopes, the wheels are always straight. So we have seen some of these designs when when they're demonstrated on a perfect slope, which is like the turf material. So it has the power, so it'll climb it. But when we run it in a real scenario where there are divots and there are pits on that slope, the robot tends to slip because it's unable to pivot the wheels in the front at all to kind of balance itself. So those are the kind of things which become very prominent when you are using that design. And that's why if you see the number 5 collar row at the bottom, it has a lot of red marks in it because it's also a very complex design, because those rollers might get pebble or dirt might get stuck into it. They may not spin correctly. Then you're just dragging the wheel. So there are a lot of other things that go with it. So we don't really like that design so much, also based on our experience. Now, the Yarbo design also is not, I would say, optimal for all yards. However, the design is great for some yards. Now, of course, it's got these big tracks, which gives it the best traction you can get. But do I need a Yarbo for my residential yard? And that thing is pretty long, and it's going to, or something similar, right? Like there's another brand called Limo, it's using similar design. You are essentially putting a lot more pressure per surface area on the lawn, and those machines are heavy as well. And then when they turn, they're essentially putting that entire weight. And if you have a lawn which has a lot of corners and nooks and crannies, again, you end up tearing. And we've had a customer who has a typical yard. We strongly advised against Yarbo, but he wanted it just because he liked the concept. I mean, he likes the machine when it works, but he doesn't like how it leaves track marks and everything around his pool and things like that. So he's getting another unit this year for some of those complex areas. But it's a good design, but it's probably not right for every kind of yard. The way they market it for every yard. They show it in a residential yard and things like that. But I don't think that's the right robot for a typical residential yard. And it is a perfect robot for something like a ranch or a large farmhouse, which has more rough kind of a ground. I think Yarbo, and we've deployed that in those kind of scenarios, and it works great. And that's probably the only unit we would use in those kind of applications. So all of these have their pros and cons in terms of what works where better. And the Sunseeker design also is pretty awesome because they have a rear wheel with motorized, like it's an all-wheel drive system at the end of the day. It's a single wheel, but because it's driven with large wheels on the front and rear wheel is also motorized, this robot has the best turning radius in terms of getting into those tight corners and things like that. We really love that about it, and we recommend if someone has a lot of tree beds and these corners, and they also have ups and downs, that's our go-to robot. But again, all of them have their pros and cons, and depending on the yard type, it's best to choose what would work the best for your yard. If someone comes and says AWD is the solution for everything, that's not necessarily applicable for all yard types. Okay. All right. Hopefully that should give you guys a good idea of the drive system. And this is the last piece about the design aspects of the robot, which is important to consider, is the cutting system. The razor blades versus fixed blades. I mean, I've seen a lot of debate on this on different forums as well, that fixed blade is good, razor is good. The bottom line is that we recommend razor blade cutting system for most lawns, and that's because that's the most efficient way to cut the lawn. That's the best way to not stress the grass. It's much quieter. It's more power efficient. You can go pretty low on it if you want to, and it's very easy to maintain and manage. Only thing is you need to change the blades more often. That's the only downside of it. But that downside is actually a positive, because if you're changing the blades more often, then you're keeping that sharpness on enabled on those blades all the time, and that's what gives you a clean cut, and that's what keeps your grass healthy, right? Versus a fixed blade system, although I wouldn't recommend it for every single use case or yard, but it's definitely a good use case for like the ranch kind of properties. And that's why we love the Yarbo Pro for those kind of properties, because they have the thick grass, almost like straw and hay, which needs a much stronger cutting system. These razor blades normally don't cut it sometimes. You get an uneven cut, and that's where you need those fixed blades. And like if you're mowing in like solar farms, or if you're mowing in large ranches where the grass can be pretty thick, you need that a much more than just those razor blades, and that's where that comes in handy, but not for every yard. But at the same time, the fixed blades are more power consuming. They usually need more powerful motor so they can generate that wattage and the speed and power to cut. But again, the advantage is that they also are able to create that suction for some type grass type that need that suction so that they can mow even taller grass, for example. So those are the advantages of the fixed blade, but we don't really recommend that for all yards. It's only on specific use cases. So that's the difference. But our go-to cutting system has always been the razor blade, and that's why all the golf courses, everybody use just that and not this. Okay, so that's the cutting system. Okay, one last thing is capacity. So you must have seen all these robots advertising themselves as 6-acre capacity, 3-acre capacity, 2-acre capacity. But what does that really mean? I've had a lot of customers, they say my yard is 1 acre, my mowing half an acre. I think half an acre unit should be more than sufficient for me. But that's not true all the time, because so the way these robots are rated is that they're rated for a certain acreage based on some assumptions that it's a flat open yard. It has a certain speed. The robot, they measure the certain speed, and based on the speed, they measure how much distance it will cover over unit time, how much time it takes to charge, how much time it runs on each charge. All of those metrics are taken into account. And then for a flat yard, they calculate, okay, can in 24 hours maintain up to half an acre. That's how the rating comes out, right? So when you see half an acre, it means typically the robot has mowed that yard for 24 hours or 48 hours or 72 hours continuously, and it was able to mow every inch of the yard. Now, what happens is the moment you add complexity, you add terrain, you add more like nooks and crannies, you add more number of turns. Now it has to go to different zones. It has to manage some slope and ups and downs. What does that do? It essentially reduces that range by quite a bit. So the moment you add the more number of turns it takes, the more it's going to spend time turning and less time mowing. So whatever calculations were made based on just a simple thing don't apply anymore. And that's why, and some people might want to just mow in the night. So if you're only going to mow in the night, they don't want it running in the day, then you're losing even more coverage. But they want it mowed every day, for example. So all those things come into play, and that's why it's very important when you're looking at these the capacity of a robot. You look at the detail specs. Like these are a couple of snapshots I've put here from a couple of manufacturers, where it tells you how long it would take to mow that maximum area that they're recommending. So if one of them says 72 hours, but when people say 6 acres, what does that really mean? So it's running 24/7 for 72 hours, then it gets to 6 acres. Same thing with Yarbo, for example. And some of them have two different ranges. One is 24 hours, one is 48 hours. So 24 hours is typically the recommend for like sports facilities, which needs mowing more frequently. And for other yards, they say, okay, you can let the grass grow a little bit. So that's how the range comes in. And that's why, if someone says if my lawn is about, or my yard or my lot is about 1 acre, then will the 1 acre unit be perfect? Maybe not. And that's where, it becomes a little bit important to understand, again, the battery life as well, because if you're using a robot that's going to run too often to cover that whole area, it's going to deplete those charge cycles much faster, and you'll have a dead battery much sooner than what it's rated for, right? So those are the things that come into account. And of course, when it starts raining, then your grass starts growing faster, and then that unit is not able to keep up. Then you have to call somebody to mow because it's not able to keep up with the grass. All those struggles come into play, and that's why considering a robot which is right size, and typically we just tell, if you don't know how to calculate it, just go by double. If your overall area is half an acre, just go with a 1 acre unit. If it's 1 acre, go with a 2 acre unit. It just will give you a better experience overall, and that's usually a recommendation. Okay, so now getting into 2026 and what's new. So we start with Husqvarna. So Husqvarna, before 2026, they had a lot of these. The last year they had introduced the IQ series, which are pretty good robots, and then they also had the EPOS for commercial. And this year they only added 3 of their models on the commercial side, which is the 560 EPOS, the 580 EPOS, and the 580 low cut, which is mainly for the golf and athletic field channel. Essentially, they are built for better performance for commercial applications, and these units will include a camera starting this year. And Husqvarna is a little bit late into the game usually when it comes to adapting, almost like Apple. But when they do it like perfectly. So this one will have cameras, and then the range is again not the best compared to some of the competition. But again, if you take 48 hours, you can mow up to 4 acres. Or it's 2 acres over 24 hours. And then same thing with the 560, which can mow 1.5 acre or 3 acres. So there are 2 different variations to that. And they will be supporting network RTK this year. It was supposed to be in March. We haven't yet heard any confirmation whether or not it's available. But yeah, it's going to support network RTK, and they also have some other new tools available for dealers for easy installation and things like that. And what we have visibility for future is like for customers who already own some of the IQ series, the residential units, there will be an add-on camera that will be available next year, which they can bring their robots to the dealership, and the dealer will be able to add a camera. Of course, you pay for the camera and whatever the cost is, and then it has to be programmed to start supporting the camera. And what we love about Husqvarna's design is the technology design that they use inside the robot is a perfect design for adding things like this. And that's where they shine in terms of the way they've implemented the technology. So you can add, let's say today they're adding a camera, tomorrow they might add something else. So they've designed it to keeping future in mind. So even though they're not early, they can retrofit their older models with new technology. So that's the beauty of it. And so that's what we are expecting with Husqvarna for 2026 and beyond. Moving on to Sunseeker. So Sunseeker has before 2025 or 2026, they had the Gen 1 X7 series, which were pretty popular, and a lot of our customers still love their Sunseekers. We've had some issues with some aspects of it, like for example, the rear wheel was failing a lot. But one thing we loved about Sunseeker is they have really worked with us to ensure that those issues were addressed. It was a challenge in the peak time, the robot goes down and you have to help the customer out. But then Sunseeker always had our back, and that's why. And those are the kind of things we look for in a brand, right? So X7 did have some of those issues. The plastics were not maybe as good as they should be for the price range. So what they have done is they've added a Gen 2 of X7, and the Gen 2 looks amazing. We've been testing it. It looks awesome. The Gen 2 has got a better build quality. It has a higher processing capability, 10 tops, tera operations per second. It, of course, has VSLAM, and now it has a TOF sensor in the front along with the cameras. So TOF is kind of a more, I would say, a watered down version of LiDAR. Instead of having an array of light sensors or array of light beams, it has a single light source, and it's able to bounce that off objects and measure distance more accurately, right? So that helps in terms of identifying objects in the night much better. So they have added that to the stereo camera, and then they're going to have an option of fixed blade, other than and probably they're the only ones in that segment offering this option where you can replace the pivoting or the razor blades with this fixed blades. So then based on the application, it'll work better. And it has wider and better rear wheel. So the problem we had most with the rear wheel, we must have worked on like many units replacing that rear wheel. But that they have gone over 3 or 4 iterations, and now the one that we have is about almost an inch wider, and it's a much better in terms of build quality. So that's going to help a lot. It has, of course, better software improvements, better app, and things like that. So those are the main updates to the X7. The X5 also has a Gen 2 this year. So X5 is more for smaller yards, also an all-wheel drive. It's an Elite series. So Elite series are only available through the dealer channel. You cannot buy them online. Either you can buy it through a dealer or dealer's web store. Now, the X5 Gen 2 all-wheel drive is also an all-wheel drive, again, three-wheel design, perfect for small to mid-sized gardens. And it has additional disc, and this is something that some other manufacturer also are adapting. It has, if you see this picture over here, it has a small disc with 2 blades, which gets activated every time the robot runs along the edge. So you get closer to the edge. And that otherwise it's turned off, so it's not wasting battery, and then the other disc takes over. So you get a much closer cut to the edge, maybe an inch or so, versus having 4 or 5 inches of unmowed grass along the edge. So that really helps. And the other one is the X4 LiDAR, which is also a unit we have been testing, and it's been working amazingly well. Especially in narrow corridors and complex areas, this would be a perfect fit. It uses a 360 dome. Again, we already spoke about the pros and cons of this. So just take that into consideration. But as far as functionality is concerned, it's done a fabulous job. And the most exciting piece for us with Sunseeker is the X9. Now, I think we're really looking for, this is not out yet, as yet. It'll be available sometime in May, June. I mean, realistically speaking, I think it'll be available for mainstream, maybe more for next season, because by the time it's available here, we might be towards mid or end of the season. But this is something we're very excited about. It has some really great features. It has fixed front wheels and pivoting rear wheels, a little bit different from others. The argument here is that if you have pivoting front wheels, then you tend to, when you're making turns, the front wheel will then lay the grass down, and then the blade runs over it. So the chances are you might have, especially when you're making a lot of turns, the chances are that the blade might not hit the grass because the front wheel has already trampled it. That's the argument it's trying to solve, where now the front wheels are straight, so the blade comes in contact with the grass first and then it turns. So that way you are turning over cut grass rather than first turning and then cutting the grass. So that's where this design kind of shines. Of course, it has much powerful motors. And the biggest point, which I think none of the other manufacturers have addressed on a commercial segment, is it has a very fast charging time. So they have 2 models, the X9 and the X9 Plus. The X9 is, again, 3 acres, and 6 acres, again, that's over 72 hours from what I understand. Yeah. And but it has a very fast charge time. So you can get a 17 amp charger on the Plus unit, and it can charge in just 20 minutes. That's pretty fast. So you will get more time and less charge time, and that will really be beneficial for commercial lawns. And also for large lawns, residential and commercial. And other big thing this has is a trimmer attachment. So this has a little trimmer, and most manufacturers, the way they're solving trimmer is where they're just adding a piece to the robot on the side, hoping that it'll get something. The way this is slightly different, it's doing essentially the same thing, but the trimmer has its own TOF sensor. So the trimmer detects some object or something, it'll adjust. But that's the additional, I would say, capability it has. Others will just run, hoping that it's trimming. Same thing with the Yarbo, it's just running, hoping that it's trimming. And I mean, what we feel is that I think the trimmer should be looked at as a standalone application where the trimmer and the robot are communicating with each other. So if the trimmer should have its own camera, for example, should be able to see whether or not it really trimmed the grass or not, then it should be able to stop the robot, make it go back, trim it, and then move on. I think that's a true trimmer solution, because that's how people do it. When you're trimming, you see something didn't get cut, you go back and go over it multiple times. I think that nobody has. Everybody's trying to solve it by just going along the edge and hoping that it gets trimmed. But this one is a little bit more because it has a sticking arm that sticks out. It needs to avoid any obstacles and go around it. So it has that. But this is probably the most exciting piece about this, to see how it's going to work, and we are looking forward to that. So those are the updates from Sunseeker. Okay, I've not covered pricing for any of these. You can go to a website and look at pricing for all these models. It's all available on our website, or you can send us an email and we'll be more than happy to help you guys. Yarbo, again, they had all the modules. If you guys know Yarbo, it's a modular robot. It has a core, and then you can attach all these attachments and use it as a mower, as a snow blower and blower, and all those cool things. Now, this year, what they have come up with is a mini version of it. What they realize is like what the same challenge that I told you, where in tight spaces it's too long. And they're trying to address more residential yards by coming with a mini version of it. It's much smaller, but it's the same modular concept. It has its own trimmer. It has a plow instead of a snowblower, and it also has a leaf collector module instead of a leaf blower module. So these are the different things. It is rated for up to 1.5 acres. Designed for much smaller yards. Another big thing this has, it has LiDAR. So it has a dome LiDAR, but it has LiDAR. So it is going to help in like those tight corner spaces, narrow passages, under trees, under woods, and all those kind of things. So that will be something that we'll see how they have launched it on Kickstarter as a marketing strategy, I'm assuming. But we are really looking forward to this as well, and test it and see how it goes. But this will realistically, although it's announced for 2026, realistically it'll be available later this year, towards the end of the season, and maybe next year even. Kress is another brand we are very excited about. They have, after a long time, Kress has introduced some new models. For one, they have added a camera, and they're calling those series iPilot series. And they also have the same little two blades on the side for edging, which is, I think, also in some of other brands we've seen. And they also have introduced an all-wheel drive finally. So they again have a pretty well designed robot with good movement and good suspension on front and the back. So so the four wheels are in contact all the time. And they come in 3 variations: half acre, 1 acre, and 1.5 acre. And then Kress has directly jumped into mainstream commercial. They have launched their Voyager, which is a 40-inch deck with capacity of 7 to 8 acres in every 8 hours. It has all the technology you can think of, because it's going to be running in like wide open areas. And they are also launching the Mega 600, or the KR238, which is a robot designed specifically for sports fields and golf courses. And this is designed to mow like 22 acres over 48 hours. That's the coverage capacity it has. It has pretty insane ground speed and a pretty wide cutting deck of 24 inches. And Kress has also announced their new fleet services platform on the commercial side. There's a new app that's coming out, where now the end users can install Kress robots on their own, rather than relying on the dealer to come and install it using the mapping cart. The robots are also going to be compatible with the new mapping cart. It's called a mapping cart 2.0. But if you notice, the antennas, the RTK antennas, are no longer removable like they were in the old Kress mowers. They are fixed within the robot, because now the users can install it themselves. And that's something that everybody was asking for Kress. They didn't get a lot of residential penetration because of that. And of course, they also have launched an extended network, just like everybody else. So Kress used to be the only one having the network RTK, because they had their own network. And now they have partnered with other providers, and they're giving an extended network, so you don't have to worry about not having coverage from Kress. So those are the key things from Kress. Navimow, or Segway, is probably the most exciting lineup that we have right now, because they kind of have robots across all kinds, and they have introduced the LiDAR and the all-wheel drive on the smaller side, and they also have introduced a sweet spot robot that we call it, which is the H2 series, which has LiDAR, network RTK, and vision, and it's probably one of the most reliable robots we have tested ever. It's an amazing robot. Unfortunately, it's half an acre is the max capacity it has. but it's a pretty good robot. Great quality, great components in terms of quality of components, and it's so quiet, and it does a fabulous job. We really like this H series a lot. And then of course the Terranox and the X4 series, the all-wheel drive units, they are great again in terms of the design, the quality, and all of that. Only downside I would say is that it's a little bit on the larger side. So if there are yards that might be acre and a little bit more complex, I might be a little hesitant depending on the yard type, whether or not we should use this, or maybe a Sunseeker would be a better option. But definitely a pretty good design. It of course has a front pivoting thing. Again, there's an argument about the grass being unevenly cut. We have to still see how that really turns out. But it does have the front wheel like turn design, and but it looks pretty cool as well. And it is all network RTK. So all these robots that they've released this year are all network RTK. You don't need any antennas at all, even including the small I-206 and I-210, which is fabulous. And they're ready out of the box. Now this one, the Terranox, is for 6 acres, 3 acres. Again, 6 acres is over 72 hours. 3 acres is I think over 40 hours or something like that. But yeah, they are massive machines, and they can maintain that kind of an area with the battery size that they have and all of that. So we're really excited about Segway robots this year. Now these are our top picks for residential. Of course, the H series that I was talking about are pretty good. The Sunseeker LiDAR, we love it for complex yards. On the all-wheel drive side, we love the Sunseeker, the Navimow X4, and the Kress iPilot. We haven't yet tested iPilot ourselves because we didn't get our hands on any unit as yet. But this is something that we've seen in action, and we really like the way it works and runs and all of that. And then on the medium to large size, Husqvarna is always one of our favorites. They are one of the most reliable brands out there. And again, the H comes in over here as well. And then the new iPilot from Kress, and of course the X4 series as well, because they also have a 430, which is for 1 acre yards. So that's something we really like. And then on the very large or rough yards, we still go to Yarbo for those rough yards. And then for large commercial or large residential, there's a 3 or 6 acre option on the Terranox, which can be pretty handy, and we really love them. And then on the commercial, these are top picks without saying, the Sunseeker X9. We are waiting eagerly for this. We are really looking for this to come out so we can see it in action. And of course, the Voyager for large commercial, as well as the Segway Terranox series. A little bit quick update on our gate. So I don't know if maybe some of you guys know, we have a gate that we have designed. We have 3 patents on it. We introduced this back in 2019, and it has evolved over time. So we have a lot of experience working on making it finer, better, and things like that. So this year we're launching a new locking mechanism for the gate. We've come up with multiple iterations over the last few years because we designed the gate to be very modular. It's not like the lock is not built in. We designed it because different users have different expectations. Some don't need the lock, some need the lock, some need a battery, some need a power to be run. So we designed it in a very modular fashion where you can buy just the gate without the lock, or you can buy the gate with the lock and powered by a battery, or you can buy just the lock later on and add on to the gate, or you can power it with the mains, or you can power it with solar, which is coming this year. So we designed it in a very modular fashion, and we also introducing a new locking mechanism this year, which is going to be much more reliable. We had some reliability issues with the previous version, so we fixed some of those design issues, and we're releasing that this year. And we're also releasing a new triggering mechanism. So when the robot comes close to the gate, it has to unlock based on the proximity. So earlier we were using a magnet, which is mainly designed around Husqvarna wired units, but with all the other wireless units coming in, we had to come up with something which would work across multiple brands. And that's why we have come up with a UWB module, which will trigger the gate within 2 feet or trigger the lock within 2 feet to unlock it, and then the robot goes through and instantly latches the gate back. That's something that we'll be releasing maybe sometime in May time frame. It's all in production right now. So this is something we are really looking forward to as well. And lastly, I'll spend maybe 1 minute. We're already reaching, but we'll definitely take some questions in a second here. I've given some examples of the yards, typical yards. Like this is a yard that has a lot of tree cover and it has pretty large acreage that needs to be covered. So if someone says, can I use an all-wheel drive? Yes, you can use all-wheel drive, but if you look at the complexity, the all-wheel drive is going to run out of battery much faster. It's going to go through multiple charge cycles to cover all of this, although all-wheel drive can do it. This yard had some slopes, like around the pond and stuff, but the slopes are not bad. So we decided to go with a rear-wheel drive from Segway, and it does a fabulous job. It takes care of the entire yard, although it's about less than an acre that needs to be mowed on the entire yard, but the complexity makes it too hard. And even with the 2.5 acre rated robot, it has to mow over a day and a half to get to every part. So that's what I was talking about, right? So that's why the acreage becomes very important, and how you choose the robot. The 440 IQ could also work. The reason we did not go with the 440 IQ in this scenario is it is rated for up to 2 acres, similar. But then the tree cover is where the 440 IQ would fall behind a little bit because it doesn't have a camera. The Navimow camera supplement really helps in some of these areas with the tree cover is, and we've seen 440 sometimes struggle. And when we have so much of tree cover, we chose to go with 390, X390. So that's one example. Another example is where it's a wide open yard and then he had a little area on the other side. Over here, we chose a Husqvarna 410 IQ. It was less than 0.4 acres, only because it was much easy. It was simple. It was flat. We could have also used a 315. It would mean the same thing. Now, the LiDAR in this case might not be a good option because there's a wide open area right in the middle. If the robot is right in the middle and there's nothing to bounce off the light off, then it might struggle. And that's where, in these kind of scenarios, LiDAR may not be the best option. If you have a complex yard with a lot of objects where the light can bounce off of and build a map, yes, LiDAR is perfect for that. And that's why LiDAR could become questionable in a yard like this. But if it had some flower beds or some objects or something in between, then LiDAR could also work. Now, Sunseeker also could work over here, but it's an all-wheel drive system. It's a flat yard. You really don't need that low battery efficiency unless you are very particular about those very straight absolute lines, then yes. So those are some options that you could go with. Now, this is a yard which is pretty typical yard that you would see. And it has a front yard and a backyard, and a very narrow passage on one side of the house. And over here is where any of these LiDAR units would do perfectly, because it has to get into that very narrow passage where none of the RTK systems are going to do well. The vision is not going to do well as well. And now you need a LiDAR. So this is a very perfect use case for a LiDAR unit. So it can get all those narrow passages, even if it had a lot of tree cover, if it could go under a decking if you want. And that's why I-110 would not be a good option. Only because it relies only on RTK and it's going to fail for sure in this kind of setup. And finally, this is another final example of a yard which is a little over 1.5 acre, but they have this extreme slope at the back. And what we have done is we have actually deployed 2 robots here. One robot is dedicated to maintain that slope itself is close to over 0.5 acre, and that much slope for 0.5 acre, you are going to consume a lot more battery than you would normally would. So we have a Sunseeker actually managing that slope for this property, and then we have another unit managing the flat areas for this particular customer, and it's been doing a fabulous job. So sometimes you might need to design the solution where you might now you could technically get one big 3 acre or 6 acre unit, but the amount of time is going to spend mowing that berm, it might not get to the flat areas much sooner, and then you might start seeing uneven grass growing everywhere, and the robot is always working hard, consuming more and more of its battery. So in these scenarios, it might just make sense to split it into get the robot dedicated, one robot dedicated to the slope and other one to do the flat areas, so you get more efficiency and a better solution. Anyway, so that's all that I have, and I'll hand over to Tanvi real quick. We just have this little code for you guys. If you are in the market looking for a robot, we are offering $100 on us if you want to buy one and save some money, and this will be applicable on top of any ongoing deals. So with that, Tanvi, I'd like you to take over, give a little bit of the ending, and then we'll take some questions. I know we're already over, but we can take some questions if everybody has some time.
Thank you, Ash. I've placed the discount link in the chat box for anybody who wants to directly go to our website from there. In addition to that, I also wanted to share some current deals that are going on. And I'm going to just share this with you. So if you'd like to take advantage of today's $100 attendee-only exclusive discount, you can pair it up with these current brand deals that are live from Husqvarna, which is up to 48% off on their new IQ series. Yarbo, they have about 15 configurations on their modular robots, and it's up to $900 off on all-season robots. Also, Kress has these deals going on. So you can head over to our website and view these deals and stack them up with our existing $100 discount. Another $100 if you purchase a dot kit, all through the link in the chat box. Yep, we can go ahead and take questions now. That's all I had to say. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, then. Okay. So while we wait for people to ask questions, maybe you might have to unmute. Then we are able to unmute themselves, I guess. I think William has a question. Okay. William, go ahead.
Yeah, can you hear me, guys?
Yes.
Perfect. I also dropped my question in the chat just to have it there as well.
Okay.
I actually have two questions.
Sure.
First, as a dealer, what are some of the things that you've done to find success in this marketplace? You know, it seems very novel. One of the biggest hurdles seems to be re-education.
Right.
You know, a lot of people that we've talked to are, you know, tell them about it and they go, that can't be real. And in that same line, you know, or I guess there's three questions in this question. So that's the first question. What are some things you guys are doing to find success? Number two, what is the ratio you guys are expecting to see or are seeing between residential and commercial?
Mm-hmm.
And then number three, you know, some of the biggest brands just started to get shelf space in places like Walmart, Lowe's,
right,
Home Depot. What are some things that you guys are doing, number one, to combat that, and number two, you know, potentially just to lean into it, or yeah, where do you guys see it on this side as well?
Yeah, I think
I know that's a lot of questions.
Sorry,
I apologize.
All right. So okay. So let me answer you one by one, right? So, as far as what we are doing differently, so the biggest value that our customers get from us is that consulting factor, and the fact that we understand this technology, all these technologies so well, we are able to guide them towards the right solution. And on top of that, we always are there to support our customers. They don't have to go to a chat bot on the manufacturer's website or call the 1-800 number. They work with us directly, and then we are here to solve any problem. And then as we are learning, we are mitigating that to our customers in terms of we are proactively telling, hey, this is what we found, do XYZ, so that you can be aware. I mean, it's very hard to mitigate, send something like that to everybody. We have information from our customers, and then we are starting this whole e-course platform or e-learning platform on our website, you go, you can find it on our website. We launched a couple of courses already. So we are giving access to our customers, residential and commercial, so that they have all the necessary education that's needed to not only make the right decision, but also to make sure they know how to maintain the robot, how to do basic troubleshooting, how to even do repairs. So that way they have all these uh, tools available to them to be successful with their robot. So that those are some of the things we're doing. And then as far as the residential to commercial segmentation, I think until last year, I would say it was more like, at least from what we have done, it was more like 80-20 or 90-10. This year, we are seeing it more going to like 70-30, like 70 residential and 30 commercial. But we are seeing a very clear path of it almost becoming 50-50, because the amount of interest in residential, in commercial that we are seeing this year is much higher than anything else that we have seen before. So we are seeing that higher uptake on the commercial, and the commercial also includes like landscapers who, as at the end of the day, a lot of them are serving homes, and homeowners not always want to manage and maintain a machine themselves. So landscapers are taking advantage of that, and they're essentially using robots as an employee. So that's what we are seeing. And what is the third part of the question again? I'm forgetting the third part.
Sorry, the third part was to do with this year. Some of the larger brands, Navimow, Motion, etc., are starting to actually get shelf space in places like
Yeah. So okay,
Home Depot.
yeah. So one of the things, if you know, I mean, a lot of these companies, especially the Chinese brands, they are driven a lot by numbers in terms of number of units and things like that. And so moving numbers becomes important to them, and they're kind of targeting a lot of the retail like Walmart, Lowe's, Home Depot, because they get they they're able to have the distribute. I mean, some of them are going to the distribution model. Some are still going to the dealer model. Again, let's not go into that. But because they're able to push more units out there, and if you notice, some of them are just moving some specific brands into these retail stores, or not specific brands, rather models, uh, because they're trying to stay within a price point and things like that. Uh, Husqvarna has tried this in the past with the wire units, and they were not successful. Uh, Hopefully, with now we are at a stage where the installation and management is much easier, so maybe there'll be a little bit of more of an uptake. But if you saw everything that we shared today, those things will still come into play. If a user is saying, "Oh, this is a robotic lawnmower, it's a automatic lawnmower, I'll take it from my yard," it's not necessary that that's going to work for them. And that's the thing we have to see as to how that adoption goes moving forward. Whether it'll be a success or not, we'll only know over time. But if anybody is buying a robot, I would suggest, I'm not saying just SmartDots, but talk to some dealer, because they have experience. They might be able to guide. Even if you see something in Walmart or uh, Costco or any other store, you might want to just call a dealer and get their take on that. Then you can go and buy from Walmart if you want. But that's very important, and that's where we come in to help our customers. And if you see, we are very active on Reddit and other forums. We are always there to answer all questions, because we want to be advocate for this technology. So that's my take on that. So we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, makes sense. Last little short question, and you don't have to answer in details. I noticed you guys left Motion out of a lot of the presentation. Any reasoning for that?
Yeah, the Memotion, we still technically still dealers from Memotion. We've had a lot of issues with Memotion as a dealer, and even from a product standpoint. I think John can say a lot more about it. I mean, John is our technician and robotics manager. John, you want to say something about Memotion? You're on mute, John. Okay, no, that's fine. So I'll fill in for John. So he's having some audio issues. So basically, the challenge with Memotion is that I don't think they are set up for supporting a good dealer network.
How's that running now?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay. But yeah, I would agree with Ash that the biggest thing is the support from them. With our other brands that we really like a lot, like Sunseeker and Segway, the support is it's basically instant. Parts come relatively fast, and they give us kind of direct answers. With Motion, it's just kind of the opposite. It's really hard to get to the completion part of fixing a repair, answering questions, or troubleshooting. And for that reason, and also a little bit of the build quality, it's extremely hard to work on. And we often have something break right after something else fixes is kind of a reason we went away from Motion.
Yep. And not a big fan of the design itself, like you might have already seen in our previous. So those are the reasons as far as Motion is concerned.
Right.
All right.
Got it.
I also
Awesome.
have re-registration questions if you wanted me to answer those, Ash.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so the first question I got said, should I wait one more year for a new tech, or will the mowers a year from now be comparable? That's kind of a two-part answer. I would say if you get the most high-tech mowers and you get mowers where that model has come out this year, some of the new, Sunseeker, Segway, stuff like that, the new Kress units, those units, especially because they're new and they're going to run for a couple years, that's going to stay the same. And if you go with the best technology, that's where everyone's going to be catching up to next year. So if you get something, for example, the H2 that has the LiDAR, it also has the RTK, it also has the vision, there's not really much more room for them to grow as far as reliability and redundancy. So if you're thinking about something like that, then I would stick with it. If you're a ride or die Husqvarna and maybe you're waiting for vision, maybe you're waiting for network RTK or something like that, then that would be where you would want to wait a year. But as far as technology goes, the top of the line stuff is going to be very similar to next year. And next year it might just be a 2.0 or a update or, a new style on the body or something simple like that. So I would say to that question, that's kind of my two-part answer for that. The question we got in second was heavy tree canopy for LiDAR. And what does the lawn coverage mean? Is it one charge or 1 acre? Heavy tree coverage, LiDAR, that's going to be fantastic. Not only will it be good, it'll be even better because those trees are more things for the LiDAR to bounce off of. So you're going to have even more accuracy and your map is going to be, even more precise. As far as coverage goes, Ash went over that. It's different kind of per brand and sometimes even per unit. Some brands are going to be over a 24-hour. I would say your rule of thumb is the capacity that it's telling you is what area it could cover on like a regular basis. Whereas maybe another day that it might be off, you have to run it to catch up, or some days things are going really well and it gets all the stuff done. I would say that's kind of where that is. So at SmartDots, we always go above capacity. I think one, that saves you your battery and your charge cycles, but also if you're ever in a pinch, it's going to rain in a couple days, or maybe it did rain for a couple days and you want to get that lawn mowed really quick before all that growth, get the bigger battery. It's usually not incredibly more expensive, and it's really going to cut your time to mow. And then also those charge cycles are going to be a lot better. And if it's going back at 60% battery and charging instead of going back at 10% battery and charging, that battery is going to last a lot longer also. The third question is, what's the best robot for summer, winter? And then he's got snow as particular. That's just going to be the Yarbo. That's the only thing we have for both seasons. It is also the only one that's really, there are a couple newer robots that have the snow blowing capability, but anything new is going to be, kind of an issue is when it comes to software updates and things popping up and not knowing if something's going to break or last long or the longevity. So I would say that Yarbo, and the new Mini is pretty cool with a plow, but the Yarbo Pro is probably where it's at. It's a lot faster. It's a little bit of a stronger machine, and I think they've just updated everything in general. And question number 4 is our last from the registration questions. It says, I currently have a Husqvarna 430X with a 3G card. They need to replace it with a 4G card. but also looking at replacing the unit with a Segway. I would say that's one of the most popular things this year is replacing a 430 or a 450 with a Segway. One, first and foremost, you're getting the more coverage out of it because they can do stripes and patterns. That's where you're getting your capacity. Is that now I can make these straight paths and go back and forth instead of bouncing around like those 430s and 450s do. Also, the camera is a huge deal. A lot of people love to switch to Segway and they go, my 430 was running over dog toys and animal droppings and my kids, this, that, and the other. Or I had people over and I left chairs in the yard and it bumped into all the chairs and stuff. That camera just makes sure that none of that stuff is happening. It's also going to help in many different ways, and the updates make it so it can recognize more objects and use the technology to get a little closer and tighter and stuff like that. So I would say that rather than upgrading any parts you need, like a 4G card or like getting new wheels or something like that, if you don't want to deal with any of the wire break issues or kind of the old machine problems you might be having or regular, fixes you got, I think switching to that Segway is always going to be a great move. They're some of the most reliable machines we have. And then we also have David Harris here saying one thing that he's noticed, especially here in Texas where we're at, is in the summer you want to keep that grass high, which is fantastic. You want that canopy high, saves you water, saves you from bleaching the roots. But he's got a unit that doesn't cut higher than 2.5 inches. Well, luckily, David, we've got almost every unit now, especially the ones for larger acreage, are going to be from 1 to 4 inches. That's the new standard, the new average. That's what everybody's rallying around. Now, double check, especially if you're getting a smaller unit, because that may not be the case. But Sunseeker, Husqvarna, and Segway, obviously, that is pretty much where you're going to be at that whole 1 to 4 inches. And especially in anywhere here in the South where you're getting that heat, you want to raise it up pretty high during the summer. And then when you're really getting that growth, the spring and the fall, go ahead and lower it. So it's actually a great question. And it's something that's not really blasted as much in the marketing and everything. Let's see if we got anything else. Is there a cost for network RTK? It does not appear that there is. Originally, there was going to be, because you used to have to switch a module for 4G in there. Now, I believe, the 4G modules are still around, but in general, if you were to buy even a cheaper unit of the Segway with network RTK, it's going to be included. Now, other brands that may add network RTK, that is going to be up to them because it is going to be a charge from the manufacturer to the RTK service. So they might have to pass it down to the customer, but we're not really going to know those until we get those companies.
There's a $33 or $34 a year for Segway right now, which includes a network RTK, and mainly it's for the cellular connection.
Okay,
so that's the only cost we know. And Husqvarna, from what I know, is going to be free, but their costs are already baked in the price of the robot. That's why they're expensive. But Kress is going to be free as well.
And as far as Timothy, you're saying the units with the small cutting disc or the trimmer, the two with the trimmer are going to be the Yarbo and that new X9, which are both going to be pretty big units. If you have a smaller yard, I think that the technology on, I really like the one on the Kress units, and they also have the similar product
on the X5, Sunseeker.
Yeah, on the Sunseeker. I think those both look really great. They're designed very sturdy. So even if you're getting that extra long trimming area or some weeds or stuff that pops up over there, I think they're really going to be able to handle it. It is also the first year those things are coming out. I can't give you a guarantee, but those are going to be some units that I think would do really well in that situation. All right, what else do we got? Well, mowers have the ability to pick up and move to another yard without any issue. Yes, that does depend on the mower that you have. It's going to be, technically, if it works on network RTK, you can do that yourself. The ones that are more built to do that are going to be the Kress units. That's because they're chasing the commercial game is kind of that's a big strategy for them. I would say just be careful with that so you're not running the units an insane amount, because if you're running them a full charge here and then another one somewhere else and another one somewhere else, it's just like that battery.
Yeah, the answer to that question is not pretty straightforward. So yeah, please call us. We can talk a little bit more in detail about that.
Right. And then we have what do we got? I think that is it so far.
Awesome. Any other questions on the call from anybody? I think we answered all the questions on the chat as well as whatever was asked here.
Oh, it looks
Great.
like the X7 units also have the trimmer. Just so you know.
Okay.
Okay, cool.
All right. I think we've already gone quite over. So thank you very much, everyone, for joining. I hope that this was a useful session. I think we are really looking forward to 2026 and beyond. If you guys need any help with what you want for your yard, please feel free to call us. We'll be more than happy, no obligations, to help you. And we're really looking forward to this year. Thank you, everyone, and have a good night.
See you. Thanks.
Thank you, everybody.